ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
Experience a progressive lens engineered with AI from Essilor, powered by individual measurements of your visual behavior. A lens personalized to you by an Essilor expert. Discover Verilux XR Track and enjoy instantly sharp vision in motion and seamless transitions from near to far. Find your local Essilor expert today at Essilor.com.
EVO. This series contains adult language and depictions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Long before spires pierced the skies over Loudun, before monks knelt in candlelit chapels, and before the scent of burning flesh drifted from the pyres of heretics, there was only earth and stone and the slow rhythmic footsteps of hunter-gatherers. Archaeological traces found on the banks of the Dive River suggest that humans first settled this part of western France as early as the Neolithic period. These early inhabitants left behind little more than flint tools and burial mounds. But their presence signaled the beginning of a long, often brutal, human story. With the centuries came the Celts, then the Romans, who carved roads through the chalky soil and introduced the old gods of their empire. Temples and shrines rose where forests had once stood. Offerings were made to Jupiter, Minerva, and Mars. But even as Roman power waned, a new religious force was stirring. Christianity crept across Gaul not as a conquering army, but as a whisper. A gospel carried by merchants, former slaves, and wandering bishops. By the 4th century, Christian missionaries had established footholds across what would become the Poitou region. Loudun, though still a modest village, began to take on the shape of a Christian outpost. Wooden churches gave way to stone chapels. Relics arrived from distant lands, and monastic communities sprang up to tend the sick and transcribe the sacred. Christianity brought order, but it also brought fear. Salvation was promised, but only through obedience and suffering and submission to God and his appointed stewards. Through the Middle Ages, Loudun became a tapestry of medieval life, a market town hemmed by fortified walls, a minor but significant hub on the pilgrimage routes stretching towards Santiago de Compostela. The church was the heart of the community, the keeper of time and truth. Its priests baptized children, married couples, and laid the dead to rest. But the church was also the hand of control, guiding souls with one hand and branding heretics with the other. By the 17th century, the church in Loudun held dominion not just over faith, but over nearly every facet of life. Its influence was palpable, heavy as incense in the vaulted cathedrals. The townspeople lived beneath the long shadow of clerical power. None more so than during the infamous events of 1632, when the convent of the Ursuline nuns erupted in alleged demonic possession, dragging the name of the priest Urbain Grandier into infamy and lighting the fires of one of France's most chilling witch trials. Welcome back to The Devil Within. You're listening to the Possessions of Loudun. But Loudun is not merely the sum of its tragedies. It's a place where history clings to the stones, where religion once shaped every sunrise and every fear. Today the town is quiet, its past echoing gently in the streets and bell towers. Yet for those who listen closely, the old songs of belief and suspicion, of power and devotion, still linger in the air, as ancient and persistent as the wind sweeping in from the plains of France. It was in 1632, beneath the Gothic arches and prayers of the Ursuline convent in Loudun, that something dark took hold. The nuns, young women devoted to chastity and the contemplative life, began to cry out in terror. They spoke in tongues, convulsed, levitated, and claimed they were being tormented by invisible demons. The town, already burdened with a long history of superstition and rigid faith, found itself on the precipice of hysteria. To understand the enormity of what occurred, we first need to understand who these nuns were. The Ursulines, an order founded in 1535 by St. Angela Merici in Italy, were dedicated to the education of girls and the care of the sick. Unlike many cloistered orders, Ursulines maintained a degree of interaction with the outside world, believing their work to be missionary in spirit. The Ursuline convent in Loudun was young, its nuns drawn largely from the minor nobility, which means women who were too proud for humble marriage, but also too poor for large dowries. They were cloistered under the authority of Mother Jeanne d'Angers, an intelligent, intense woman in her early 30s, devout yet troubled. And it was with Mother Jeanne herself that it all began. She began having visions of what she called divine ecstasies, or more simply put, erotic dreams. Soon her denial and revulsion to these images caused them to spiral into grotesque hallucinations. As she shared her troubled visions with the nuns under her care, she was surprised and a little relieved to learn that several of the sisters shared her torment. At first, there were only one or two afflicted, sisters who saw phantom shadows in their cells or heard unholy voices murmuring seductions in the night. Then, a wave of symptoms spread like wildfire. Fits of convulsion, tongues twisted into Latin curses, obscene contortions of body and soul. The nuns wailed and barked, claimed invisible hands had touched them and tore at their garments, filled them with ecstasy and revulsion. Over time, more than a dozen nuns succumbed to this affliction. Their episodes carefully documented by churchmen who both doubted and delighted in the spectacle. They spoke of dreams in which a tall priest visited them, not to bless them, but to defile them. Until finally, it was Mother Jeanne d'Angers herself that formally put a name to the monster that was causing their unholy suffering, and he was doing it through sorcery. The man accused was Urbain Grandier, the town's charismatic and controversial priest. Sometime in the waning years of the 16th century, in the French town of Bouer, amidst the rolling hills of Anjou, a child was born, whose fate would eventually interlace with murmurs of sin, sanctity, and the unseen realms of human conviction. Urbain Grandier, the son of a notary, entered the world with neither fanfare nor omen, save for the rich timbre of his voice, an attribute that would later charm congregations and scandalize courts. He was educated at the Jesuit College of Bordeaux, where discipline met brilliance, and it was here that Grandier's mind sharpened like a blade honed against a whetstone. His rhetoric was exceptional, his Latin precise, and his theological reasoning so deft that even his instructors hesitated to challenge him. Yet there was in him a dangerous strain of pride, an unyielding self-regard cloaked in the vestments of piety. By the early 17th century, he had taken the post of parish priest at the Church of St. Croix in Loudun, a provincial town swaddled in vineyards and ancient stone. The townspeople were divided in their assessment of him. Some saw a luminous shepherd of souls, a gifted preacher who could bring the Gospels to life. Others, especially the town's elite and established clergy, whispered of his arrogance and his tendency to scorn ecclesiastical authority. In Loudun, Grandier became not just a priest, but a symbol of learning, of defiance, and unbridled charisma. He wrote treatises that criticized clerical celibacy. He challenged the moral laxity of his peers and stood, often alone, against the rising tide of absolutism as the crown and the church tightened their grip on places like Loudun. He opposed the presiding cardinal's plan to demolish Loudun's fortifications, and he publicly defied established celibacy laws by engaging in multiple affairs. Worse still, he published treatises against clerical marriage bans. In an age when the church wielded absolute authority, such defiance bordered on heresy. And when his many affairs with the women of Loudun became public, alongside his treatises against clerical marriage bans, no one took more notice than Mother Jeanne and the nuns under her care. Yet, as with all figures carved from contradiction, Grandier seemed unaware, or maybe unconcerned, that his brilliance cast long shadows. The seeds of suspicion, envy, and fear took root in those shadows. In the quiet cloisters and behind shuttered windows, the stage was being set, not for his triumph, but for the slow unfolding of a tragedy that would soon engulf not just the man, but the town itself. For when Sister Jeanne stood and accused Grandier of consorting with the devil himself, it was the spark that ignited a powder keg. The summer of 1634 settled hot and heavy over Loudun, its air thick with rumors, its stone walls echoing not with the chiming of church bells, but with cries more terrible. The townspeople spoke now not of sermons or scripture, but of possession. At the Ursuline convent, a strange hysteria had taken hold of the nuns. Young women of noble birth, cloistered in prayer, now writhing, shrieking, speaking in tongues. They claimed demons plagued them, and they named their tormentor with a singular voice, Urbain Grandier. It was a name they all knew was already steeped in controversy, a man loved and loathed in equal measure, an easy target. Grandier had dared to live as he pleased, eloquent, proud, unrepentantly handsome, with a gift for both preaching and seduction. His enemies were numerous, among them the Capuchin monks, jealous clergy, and the presiding cardinal's agents, who had not forgotten Grandier's published invectives against the centralization of power. And his much publicized affair with the daughter of a local magistrate had only deepened the resentment. The allegations of demonic possession were the perfect trap. Spectacle and politics entwined under the guise of spiritual warfare, and a legal campaign began. A tribunal was convened, not of impartial minds, but of those already convinced of Grandier's guilt. He was arrested, paraded before the crowds, and accused not just of moral failings, but of witchcraft, a capital crime. The folks at Mint Mobile have a hot take. Getting a summer bod is out. Getting your savings bod is in. This spring and summer, we want skimpy wireless bills and fat wallets. And with premium wireless plans from Mint Mobile for just $15 a month, you can have both without breaking a sweat or your bank account. I ditched my legacy wireless carrier after 20 years. I live in LA, I work a ton in New York, and I travel all around the country because my kids are athletes. And everywhere I go, the calls are crystal clear. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you. All plans come with high-speed data, unlimited talk and text, and they're delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Ditch those overpriced plans and get 3 months of premium wireless service from Mint Mobile for $15 a month. This year, skip breaking a sweat and breaking the bank. Get your summer savings and shop premium wireless plans at mintmobile.com/devilwithin. That's mintmobile.com/devilwithin. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5GB plan required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customer offer for first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Going online without ExpressVPN is like driving without car insurance. Sure, you might be a great driver, but with all the crazy people on the road these days, why would you take that risk? I've been traveling a ton these last few months. Tons of airports, tons of hotels. And every time I connect to an unencrypted network, my online data is not secure. Any hacker who happens to be on that same network can easily gain access and steal all of my personal data. And it doesn't take a bunch of technical knowledge, just some cheap hardware. My 12-year-old could do it if she put her mind to it. Your data's valuable, and ExpressVPN stops hackers from stealing it by creating a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. You fire up the app, you click one button, boom, you're protected. And it works on all of your devices, phones, tablets, laptops, so you can be secure anywhere you go. My data, my work, my photos, my banking information, all of that stuff is super important to me. That's why I don't go anywhere without ExpressVPN. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/devilwithin. That's expressvpn.com/devilwithin to find out how you can get up to 4 extra months free. expressvpn.com/devilwithin.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, streaming now only on Netflix.
Clorox Sentiva smells like lavender. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
All right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender-Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
In the court, presided over by royal commissioners, the nuns convulsed and wailed as if on command. They accused Grandier of summoning demons, of consorting with Asmodeus and Leviathan, 2 of the great demons from the Holy Bible. A document was presented, a pact with the devil, allegedly signed in Grandier's own hand in blood. It was absurd, grotesque, forged, and yet it was accepted as evidence. Rationality had no place there. The trial had become theater. And Grandier, the lead actor in a drama whose ending had already been written. Still, he defended himself with erudition and composure, invoking law, theology, and reason. But reason, he learned, cannot counter fear when that fear is useful. He eventually mocked the proceedings as grotesque theater, but the trial went on, thick with spectacle and predetermined conclusions. Supposed demonic contracts, allegedly written in Latin and signed not by him now but by Lucifer, were also presented as evidence. Then torture was applied liberally to extract a confession. Grandier's legs were crushed, his body mutilated, but still he refused to confess. His silence was his final defiance. On August 18th, 1634, Grandier was led to the stake erected in the heart of Loudun. The sun bore down mercilessly. He wore the tattered cassock of a condemned priest, his face pale but unbowed. As the flames rose, he cried not in agony, but in prayer, forgiving his tormentors, even as the crowd, half horrified, half titillated, watched him burn. Thus ended Urbain Grandier, not as a man of God, not as a monster, but as something altogether more tragic. A man caught between the passions of the flesh and the obsessions of the spirit, sacrificed on the altar of hysteria and ambition. Loudun would never forget him, though what it remembered would depend, as always, on whom you asked. And one can't say for certain, but in Loudun, the ghosts remain. Not of demons, perhaps, but of a people so gripped by faith and fear that they sacrificed a man to silence the mysteries of their own souls and of their own desires. The flames that consumed Urbain Grandier's body did not extinguish the story. They illuminated it. In the centuries that followed, his ashes would settle not only in the soil of Loudun, but in the deeper sediment of France's cultural and spiritual memory. What was once a local scandal evolved into a parable of power unchecked, of fear masquerading as piety, of reason suffocated by the velvet glove of faith. Writers, historians, and theologians have returned again and again to the embers of Grandier's story. Some saw him as a martyr to truth, a Renaissance intellect consumed by a medieval world. Others portrayed him as a libertine, undone by his own vanity, a warning that brilliance without humility can be its own form of hubris. But for most, especially in the age of enlightenment and beyond, he became the embodiment of a deeper tragedy: how institutions, when threatened, will sacrifice the individual to preserve themselves. In Aldous Huxley's The Devils of Loudun, Grandier was rendered not just as a historical figure, but as a symbol of modernity strangled in its crib. Huxley, with his clinical dissection of psychology and power, framed the priest's fate as a crucible in which human frailty and institutional manipulation collided with devastating results. The nun's hysteria, the public's bloodlust, the church's need for control, each element played its role in a drama that to modern readers feels eerily familiar. Filmmakers and playwrights would later revisit the tale, embellishing, reimagining, but always circling back to the same essential conflict. What becomes of truth when it threatens the structures built to uphold it? Grandier's eloquence, his audacity to speak against authority, made him dangerous. Not for what he did, perhaps, but for what he represented. An educated man unwilling to be silenced. And so his legacy endures, not in relics or sainthood, but in questions that refuse to die. Was Grandier a scapegoat or a sinner? A prophet or a fool? Or was he, like so many men who find themselves at odds with the times they live in, simply a mirror, reflecting both the virtues and the vices of those who judged him? In Loudun, the convent still stands, though quiet now. But the stones remember. The air, though long cleared of incense and screams, still holds the faintest echo of the fire that once consumed a man not for what he was, but for what others needed him to be. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with someone who you think might also enjoy it. And head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, rate and review the show. Maybe leave me a comment. I've been reading them a lot lately, and thank you for all the kind words. And even for the criticisms. I get a lot out of that as well. Please check out our socials. I'm going to start feeding The Devil Within Pod on Instagram, and we also have video content on Spotify and on YouTube. Until next time, stay safe out there. The Devil Within is an EVO production, recorded live at Bel Air Studios in Los Angeles, California. For The Devil Within, I'm your host, Brandon Morgan.